The World Communion of Reformed Churches (WCRC) is the largest association of Reformed churches in the world. It has 233 member denominations in 110 countries, together claiming 100 million people, thus being the third largest Christian communion in the world after the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. This ecumenical Christian body was formed in June 2010 by the Union of the World Alliance of Reformed Churches (WARC) and the Reformed Ecumenical Council (REC). Among the biggest denominations in the WCRC are the Church of South India, Presbyterian Church of East Africa, Presbyterian Church of Korea, Ethiopian Evangelical Church Mekane Yesus, Church of Jesus Christ in Madagascar, Federation of Swiss Protestant Churches, Protestant Church in Indonesia, Presbyterian Church USA, Evangelical Church of Cameroon, and the Protestant Church in the Netherlands. Its member denominations on the whole could be considered more liberal than the member denominations of the International Conference of Reformed Churches or the World Reformed Fellowship, which are also large ecumenical Reformed organizations. History. The WCRC traces its origins to 1875, with several unifying Reformed organisations emerging in London, England. After a two-day meeting ending on 1 February 2006, Dewar Visser, President of the Reformed Ecumenical Council, and Clifton Kirkpatrick, President of the World Alliance of Reformed Churches, said in a joint letter to their constituencies, "We rejoice in the work of the Holy Spirit, which we believe has led us to recommend that the time has come to bring together the work of the World Alliance of Reformed Churches and the Reformed Ecumenical Council into one body that will strengthen the unity and witness of Reformed Christians." After first calling the potential body, "World Reformed Communion," this was modified into "World Communion of Reformed Churches." A uniting General Council of the WCRC, bringing the organization into existence, took place from 18 to 26 June 2010 at Calvin College, Grand Rapids, Michigan, United States. The council focused on the "unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace," mentioned in Ephesians as its main theme, setting a tone of true mutual understanding and acceptance amongst member churches and associates, laying aside differences and other issues as they embark on this shared journey with one another as each seeks to discern the will of God and continue their struggle for justice and peace in the world. Work. The 2010 Uniting General Council stated that the WCRC should be "called to communion and committed to justice." Its two main program offices are thus focused on these aspects, with theological work included with communion. The Theology and Communion Office serves as coordinator for official dialogues with other religious organizations, organizes a bi-annual Global Institute of Theology, and brings Reformed theological scholars together for various discussions. The Justice Office promotes economic, ecological and human justice, basing much of its work on the Accra Confession, a statement adopted at the 2004 General Council of the World Alliance of Reformed Churches and re-endorsed at the 2010 Uniting General Council. The WCRC also has a General Secretariat which includes the General Secretary's Office, the Communications Office and other organizational responsibilities. The current General Secretary is Chris Ferguson, a minister from the United Church of Canada. Through the General Secretariat, the WCRC is able to promote dialogue between churches, advocate for causes on a global scale and support the activities of its member churches through various means. The global headquarters of the WCRC are located in Hanover, Germany, with a North American non-profit subsidiary based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Originally based in Geneva, Switzerland, which played host to John Calvin and earned a reputation as the "Protestant Rome," the group's executive committee announced on 8 November 2012, that they would relocate the headquarters to Hanover, Germany, by December 2013, due to overbearing financial strains caused by the high value of the Swiss franc. General Secretary. Chris Ferguson is a pastor, theologian and social justice advocate from the United Church of Canada. He was elected to the post of General Secretary of the World Communion of Reformed Churches in May 2014, entering office on 1 August 2014, for a 7-year term. Previously Ferguson served as the International Ecumenical Advisor for the Programme for Ecumenical Accompaniment in Colombia 2011 to 2014, the World Council of Churches representative to the United Nations 2006 to 2010, the World Council of Churches representative to Jerusalem 2004 to 2006, and the Executive Minister of the United Church of Canada's Justice, Global and Ecumenical Relations Unit and Ecumenical Officer 2002 to 2004. Topic: Members of the Communion. This is a list of members of the World Communion of Reformed Churches as of February 2016. Algeria, Protestant Church of Algeria, Église protestante d'Algérie. Angola, Evangelical Congregational Church in Angola, Igreja Evangélica Congregational em Angola (IECA). Evangelical Reformed Church of Angola, Igreja Evangélica Reformanda de Angola (IERA). Argentina, Evangelical Church of the River Plate, Iglesia Evangélica del Río de la Plata. Evangelical Congregational Church in Argentina, Iglesia Evangélica Congregational. Australia, Congregational Federation of Australia, Uniting Church in Australia. Austria, Evangelical Church of the Helvetic Confession in Austria, Evangelische Kirche HB Reformiert in Österreich. Bangladesh, Church of Bangladesh, Evangelical Reformed Presbyterian Church in Bangladesh. Belgium, United Protestant Church in Belgium, Église protestante unie de Belgium, Verenigde de Protestantische Kerk in België. Bolivia, Evangelical Presbyterian Church in Bolivia, Iglesia Evangélica Presbiteriana en Bolivia. Botswana, Dutch Reformed Church in Botswana. Brazil, Evangelical Reformed Churches in Brazil, Igrejas Evangélicas Reformadas no Brasil. Independent Presbyterian Church of Brazil, Igreja Presbiteriana Independente do Brasil. United Presbyterian Church of Brazil, Igreja Presbiteriana Unida do Brasil. Bulgaria, Union of Evangelical Congregational Churches in Bulgaria, Evangeliska Kongreshenska Zhukwa. Burkina Faso, Association of Reformed Evangelical Churches of Burkina Faso, Église évangélique réformée du Burkina Faso. Cameroon, Africa Protestant Church, Église protestante africaine. Evangelical Church of Cameroon, Église évangélique du Cameroun. Presbyterian Church in Cameroon, Église presbytérienne camerounaise. Canada, Christian Reformed Church in North America. The Presbyterian Church in Canada, l'Église presbytérienne au Canada. Reformed Church in America. The United Church of Canada, l'Église unie du Canada. Central African Republic, Protestant Church of Christ the King, Église protestante du Christ Roi. Chile, Evangelical Presbyterian Church in Chile, Iglesia Evangélica Presbiteriana en Chile. Presbyterian Church of Chile, Iglesia Presbiteriana de Chile. China, Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Council of the Church of Christ in China. China, People's Republic of China Christian Council, associate member. Colombia, Presbyterian Church of Colombia, Iglesia Presbiteriana de Colombia, Sínodo Presbiteriano. Congo, Democratic Republic of the Evangelical Community in the Congo, Communauté Évangélique du Congo. Presbyterian Community in the Congo, Communauté Presbyterienne au Congo. Presbyterian Community of Eastern Kasai, Communauté Presbyterienne du Kasai Oriental.
Presbyterian Community of Kinshasa, Communauté Presbyterienne de Kinshasa. Presbyterian Community of Western Kasai, Reformed Presbyterian Co.
Unity in Africa, Communauté Presbyterienne au Kasai Occidental, Communauté Presbyterienne Réformée en Afrique. Reformed Community of Presbyterians, Communauté Réformée des Presbyterians. Congo, Republic of the Evangelical Church of Congo, Église évangélique du Congo. Costa Rica, Costa Rican Presbyterian Evangelical Church, Iglesia Evangelica Presbiteriana Costarricense. Croatia, Reformed Christian Church in Croatia, Reformirana Kršćanska crkva u Hrvatskoj. Cuba, Presbyterian Reformed Church in Cuba, Iglesia Presbiteriana Reformada en Cuba. Czech Republic, Evangelical Church of Czech Brethren, Evangelische Kirche der Böhmischen Brüder, Českobratska Církev Evangelica. Denmark, Reformed Synod of Denmark, Den Reformat Synod I Danmark. Dominican Republic, Christian Reformed Church in the Dominican Republic. Dominican Evangelical Church, Iglesia Evangelica Dominicana. Egypt, Evangelical Church of Egypt, Synod of the Nile, El Canasar El Injiliya. El Salvador, Reformed Calvinist Church of El Salvador, Iglesia Reformada Calvinista de El Salvador. Equatorial Guinea, Reformed Presbyterian Church of Equatorial Guinea, Iglesia Reformada Presbiteriana de Guinea Equatorial. Ethiopia, Ethiopian Evangelical Church Mekane Yesus, Ye Ethiopia Wangelawat Bate Christian Mekane Yesus. France, Malagasy Protestant Church in France, Église protestante malgache, Fiangonana protestante Malagasy. National Union of Protestant Reformed Evangelical Churches of France, Églises protestantes réformées évangéliques de France UNEPREF, formerly EREI. Reformed Church of Alsace and Lorraine, Église réformée d'Alsace et de Lorraine. United Protestant Church of France, Église protestante unie de France. Germany, Church of Lippische Landeskirche. Evangelical Reformed Church in Bavaria and northwestern Germany, Synod Evangelisch Reformierte Kirchen in Bayern und Nordwestdeutschland. Reformed Alliance, Reformierte Bund. Evangelical Old Reformed Church in Lower Saxony. Ghana, Evangelical Presbyterian Church, Ghana, Presbyterian Nyanyui Haimle Ghana. Presbyterian Church of Ghana. Greece, Greek Evangelical Church, Helleniki Evangeliki Ekklesia. Grenada, Presbyterian Church in Grenada. Guatemala, National Evangelical Presbyterian Church of Guatemala, Iglesia Evangelica Nacional Presbiteriana de Guatemala. Guyana, Guyana Congregational Union. Guyana Presbyterian Church, Presbyterian Church of Guyana. Honduras, Christian Reformed Church of Honduras, Iglesia Cristiana Reformada de Honduras. Hungary, Reformed Church in Hungary, Magyarországi Református Egyház. India, Church of North India, Church of South India. The Congregational Church of India, Maryland. Evangelical Church of Maryland. Presbyterian Church of India. Reformed Presbyterian Church, Northeast India. Indonesia, Christian Church in Central Sulawesi. Christian Church in Luwuk Banggai. Christian Church in South Sulawesi.
Christian Church of Southern Sumatra, GKSBS. Christian Church of Sumba, GKS. Christian Churches of Java. Christian Evangelical Church in Bolang Mongendau. Christian Evangelical Church in Minahasa. Christian Evangelical Church in Timor. Church of Toraja Mamasa, GTM. The East Java Christian Church. Evangelical Christian Church in Halmahera, Evangelical Christian Church in West Papua, Evangelical Church in Kalimantan, Indonesia Christian Church, Indonesian Protestant Church in Buol Toli Toli, Indonesian Protestant Church in Donggala, Indonesian Protestant Church in Gorontalo, Javanese Christian Churches (GKJ), Karo Batak Protestant Church (GBKP), Pasundan Christian Church, Protestant Christian Church in Bali, Protestant Church in Indonesia, Protestant Church in the Moluccas, Protestant Church in Southeast Sulawesi, Protestant Church in West Indonesia, Sangihe Talad Evangelical Church, Toraha Church, Iran, Synod of the Evangelical Church in Iran, Ireland, Presbyterian Church in Ireland, Italy, Waldensian Evangelical Church, Union of Methodist and Waldensian Churches, Chiesa Evangelica Valdez, Jamaica, the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, Japan, Church of Christ in Japan, Nippon Kirisuto Kyokai, Korean Christian Church in Japan, Zainichi Deacon Kirisuto Kyokai Sakai, Kenya, Presbyterian Church of East Africa, the Reformed Church of East Africa, Kiribati Protestant Church, Ekarisha ni Baretedanti I Kiribati, Korea, Republic of Presbyterian Church of Korea, Presbyterian Church in Korea, Hapdongchungtong, Hapdongjengtong, Hapdongchungtong, Presbyterian Church in the Republic of Korea, Kijang, Presbyterian Church in Korea, Daishin, Latvia, Reformed Church in Latvia, Evangeliska Reformatu Braju Drods, Lebanon, National Evangelical Synod of Syria and Lebanon, the National Evangelical Union of Lebanon, Al-Ittihad al-Injili al-Watani fi Lubnan, Union of the Armenian Evangelical Churches in the Near East, Merjawar Arawelki Hay Awataranakan Ekagasinarimirti in Lesotho, Lesotho Evangelical Church, Kariki Evangeli Lesotho, Liberia, Presbyterian Church in Liberia, Lithuania, Evangelical Reformed Church in Lithuania, Unitas Lithuaniae, Lietuvos Evangeliku Reformatu Bažnyčia, Luxembourg, Protestant Reformed Church of Luxembourg HB, Protestantische Reformierte Kirche von Luxembourg HB, Église Protestante Réformée du Luxembourg, Madagascar, Church of Jesus Christ in Madagascar, Église de Jesus Christ à Madagascar, Fiangonani Jesu a Christi eto Madagascara, Malawi, Church of Central Africa Presbyterian, Church of Central Africa Presbyterian, Harare Synod, Church of Central Africa Presbyterian, NK Homa Synod, Malaysia, Presbyterian Church Malaysia, Gereja Presbyterian Malaysia, Marshall Islands, Reformed Congregational Churches, United Church of Christ, Congregational in the Marshall Islands, Jaran Parakdron, Mauritius, Presbyterian Church of Mauritius, Église Presbyterienne de Maurice, Mexico, Associate Reformed Presbyterian Church of Mexico, Iglesia Presbiteriana Asociada Reformada de Mexico, IPAR, National Presbyterian Church in Mexico, AR, Iglesia Nacional Presbiteriana de Mexico, AR.
Presbyterian Reformed Church of Mexico, Iglesia Presbiteriana Reformada de Mexico, Morocco, Evangelical Church in Morocco, Église Évangélique au Maroc, Mozambique, Evangelical Church of Christ in Mozambique, Igreja Evangélica de Cristo em Moçambique, Presbyterian Church of Mozambique, Igreja Presbiteriana de Moçambique, Reformed Church in Mozambique, Igreja Reformada em Moçambique, United Church of Christ in Mozambique, Igreja de Cristo Unida em Moçambique, ex-Missão American Board. Myanmar, Christian Reformed Church in Myanmar, Evangelical Presbyterian Church in Myanmar, Independent Presbyterian Church of Myanmar, Mara Evangelical Church, Evangelical Mission Myanmar, Mara Evangelical Ornanopa. The Presbyterian Church of Myanmar, Kolram Presb Koran. Reformed Presbyterian Church in Myanmar. The Netherlands. Covenant of Free Evangelical Congregations in the Netherlands. The Protestant Church in the Netherlands (PCN), De Protestantische Kerk in Nederland (PKN). Remonstrant Brotherhood, Remonstrantse Broederschap. New Caledonia. Evangelical Church in New Caledonia and Loyalty Islands, Église évangélique en Nouvelle-Calédonie et aux Îles Loyauté. New Zealand. Niue Church, Ekalesia Niue. Presbyterian Church of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Niger. Evangelical Church of the Republic of Niger, Église évangélique de la République du Niger, Ekalesia Bishara ta Kassa Niger. Nigeria. Christian Reformed Church of Nigeria, Evangelical Reformed Church of Christ, Presbyterian Church of Nigeria, Reformed Church of Christ in Nigeria, United Church of Christ in Nigeria, Habadiya Ekalesia Christia Nigeria, Universal Reformed Church of Christ, formerly Church of Christ in the Sudan among the Tiv, Nongo U Christu U Ken Sudan Hen Tiv. Pakistan. Church of Pakistan, Presbyterian Church of Pakistan. The Philippines. Christian Reformed Church in the Philippines, United Church of Christ in the Philippines, United Evangelical Church of Christ, Iglesia Evangelica Unida de Cristo. Poland. Reformed Evangelical Church in Poland, Koziol Ewangelico Reformowanie w Rzeczypospolitej Polskiej. Portugal. Evangelical Presbyterian Church of Portugal, Igreja Evangelica Presbiteriana de Portugal. Romania. Reformed Church in Romania, Oradea, Kirilia Gomileki Reformatus Egihazkarulat, Oradea. Reformed Church in Romania, Transylvanian District, Romania e Reformatus Egihaz, Erdely Egihazkarulat. Rwanda. Presbyterian Church in Rwanda, Église Presbyterienne au Rwanda. Samoa. Congregational Christian Church in American Samoa. Congregational Christian Church in Samoa, Ekalesia Fa Apotopotoga Keresinau I Samoa. Senegal. Protestant Church in Senegal, Église Protestante du Sénégal. Serbia, Republic of, and Montenegro, Republic of. Reformed Christian Church in Serbia and Montenegro, Reformatska Raskanska Crkva USFRJ. Singapore. Presbyterian Church in Singapore. Slovakia. Reformed Christian Church in Slovakia, Reformovaná Crest. Cirkev na Slovinsku. Slovenia. Reformed Church in Slovenia. Solomon Islands. United Church in the Solomon Islands. South Africa. Dutch Reformed Church (DRC), Nederduits Gereformeerd Kerk (NGK). Dutch Reformed Church in Africa (DRCA, NGKA). Dutch Reformed Church of Africa, Nederduits Hervormde Kerk van Afrika (NHKA). Evangelical Presbyterian Church in South Africa. People's Church of Africa, Volkskerk van Afrika. Presbyterian Church of Africa. Reformed Church in Africa, South Africa. United Congregational Church of Southern Africa. Uniting Presbyterian Church in Southern Africa. Uniting Reformed Church in Southern Africa, Vereniging Gereformeerd Kerk in Suida Africa. Maranatha Reformed Church of Christ. South Sudan. Sudanese Reformed Churches. Spain. Spanish Evangelical Church, Iglesia Evangélica Española. Sri Lanka, Dutch Reformed Church in Sri Lanka, Presbytery of Lanka, Sudan, Presbyterian Church in Sudan, Africa Inland Church Sudan, Swaziland, Swaziland Reformed Church (SRC), Sweden, Uniting Church in Sweden or Ecumenikyrkan, founded 2011 by member church Mission Covenant Church of Sweden and 2 other denominations. Switzerland, Federation of Swiss Protestant Churches or Schweizerische Evangelische Kirchenbund, Fédération des Églises Protestantes de Suisse, Federazione delle Evangelische della Svizzera, Federazione dar las Baselges Evangelicas dar la Svizzera SEKFEPS. Tahiti, Maui Protestant Church, Iterisha Evaneria no Poranisha Farani, Église Protestante Maui. Taiwan, Presbyterian Church in Taiwan, Tai Oan Ki Tok Tu acute to the power of N Lo Kao Ho. Thailand, Church of Christ in Thailand. Togo, Evangelical Presbyterian Church of Togo, Église Évangélique Presbyterienne du Togo. Trinidad and Tobago, Presbyterian Church in Trinidad and Tobago. Tuvalu, Tuvalu Christian Church, Te Ecclesia Kelesiano Tuvalu. Uganda, Christian Reformed Church of East Africa, Reformed Presbyterian Church in Uganda, Reformed Presbyterian Church in Africa Uganda. Ukraine, Reformed Church in Subcarpathia, Reformed Church in Transcarpathia, Karpatalgi Reformatus Egihas. United Kingdom, Church of Scotland, the Presbyterian Church in Ireland, Presbyterian Church of Wales, Eglwys Presbyteriaeth Cymru, Union of Welsh Independents, Undeb Yr Annibynwyr Cymraeg, United Free Church of Scotland, United Reformed Church, United States of America, Christian Reformed Church in North America, Cumberland Presbyterian Church, Cumberland Presbyterian Church in America, ECO, a Covenant Order of Evangelical Presbyterians provisional member, Evangelical Presbyterian Church, Hungarian Reformed Church in America, Korean Presbyterian Church in America, Lithuanian Evangelical Reformed Church, Lietuvių Evangelikų Reformatų Bažnyčia JAV, Presbyterian Church USA, Reformed Church in America, United Church of Christ, Uruguay, Waldensian Evangelical Church of the River Plate, Iglesia Evangelii Ca Valdense de Rio de la Plata, Vanuatu, Presbyterian Church of Vanuatu, Presbyterian Josh Blong Vanuatu, Venezuela, Presbyterian Church of Venezuela, Iglesia Presbiteriana de Venezuela, Vietnam, Presbyterian Church of Vietnam, Zambia, Church of Central Africa Presbyterian, Synod of Zambia, Reformed Church in Zambia, United Church of Zambia, Zimbabwe, Reformed Church in Zimbabwe. See also: List of the largest Protestant denominations.